Espionage, Article 117, Revised Penal Code. But first, let us pause for a quick prayer. Now for an inspirational speech.
It's now my pleasure to introduce to you my colleague, Steve Guy. 2 days ago, Steve came in to see me and he said, I'm supposed to be delivering opening remarks. What's that all about? I said, I don't know. So it's with great expectation and excitement I now find out. And I hope you do too. Steve?
This is the part of the ceremony where I'm supposed to stand up here and say something inspirational. Yeah. The reason we put this in here is because you're going to need inspiration over the next 3 or 4 months before the bar exam. So I'll try to do the best I can. One of the unspoken rules about inspirational talks at the beginning of graduation ceremonies is that I have to quote some dead poet. Largely because dead people are thought to be much wiser than any living people. Just look around. So, since I have to quote some dead poet, I've chosen to quote from William Shakespeare, who, of course, said everything better than anybody else, so he's a safe bet. In particular, I'd like to quote from one of the early histories of Shakespeare, one of the plays that aren't played much, aren't even read much anymore, a play called Henry VI, Part 2. One point near the end of Henry VI, Part 2, there's a group of people, for lack of a better term, who could be called opposition politicians, also known as traitors, standing around in a group discussing what they're going to do when they get political power. And at one point in the conversation, one of the people turns to another one of the people and says, the first thing we do, let's kill all the lawyers. I find that inspirational. Right? And so do many of the people in here who are not lawyers. In fact, they find it much more inspirational than the lawyers do. It is so inspirational it's begun appearing on T-shirts. It's quasi-religious now, it's so inspirational. But it's odd, to me anyway, that non-lawyers find that phrase more inspirational than lawyers do. Because if you go back and read the play, you'll discover that the people saying those things in the play are the bad guys. In fact, they're not only the bad guys, they're a bunch of murderous tyrants. The guy who actually speaks the words in the play is a guy called Dick the Butcher. And Dick the Butcher butchers more than just cows. In fact, a couple of pages later on in the same scene, Dick the Butcher participates in the execution of a clerk whose only crime, is that he knows how to read. Now, Shakespeare was wise enough, I think, to understand that one of the central functions of lawyers is to tell tyrants that they can't do what they want to do. And that's going to be your role in your career. We are the people who go to the most powerful individuals, the richest corporations. In fact, sometimes, if we're brave enough, the President of the United States, and say to those people, you can't do that because it's against the law. We are also the people who are forced to explain periodically that even the most hated, reviled persons in society, petty criminals, flag burners, murderers, even the likes of Ted Bundy, have legal rights too, and the state has to respect those legal rights. Now, you applaud at that, but it is not a popular conception. It does not make us popular among tyrants, and it doesn't even make us very popular, us lawyers, very popular among normal, common, non-lawyer people. But that's okay, because if you're doing your job right, you should be unpopular. Because it will always be unpopular to tell people that they should put aside their prejudices and their intolerance and their bigotry and their hatreds and behave like civilized human beings. And if you, the lawyers, don't do that, then it's just possible that no one else will. So this summer, when you're at a cocktail party and you're feeling sorry for yourself because you hate ever getting into this business and you're dreading the bar, and some turkey comes up to you and snidely says, first thing we do, let's kill all the lawyers. Remember Dick the Butcher. And remember that this turkey who's snidely saying this to you is helping William Shakespeare, the greatest poet of the English language, pay you the highest compliment he knew how to pay. And so on behalf of me and the faculty and William Shakespeare, welcome to a noble profession. Thank you.
It's now my distinct pleasure to introduce to you a man who really needs no introduction, the head of the Florida State family.
Article 117, Espionage. The penalty of prison correctional shall be inflicted upon any person who, number 1, without authority, therefore, enters a worship, fort or naval, or military establishment or reservation to obtain any information, plans, photographs, or other data of a confidential nature relative to the defense of the Philippine archipelago. And number 2, being in possession, by reason of a public office, he holds of articles, data, information related to in line preceding paragraph and discloses their contents to a representative of a foreign nation. The penalty next higher in degree and shall be imposed if the offender be a public officer or employee. There are two ways of committing the crime of espionage. The first way of committing the crime of espionage is by entering, without authority, a warship, fort or military or naval establishment or reservation to obtain any information, plan or other data of a confidential nature relative to the defense of the Philippines. Now, what are the elements of the first way of committing espionage? Number 1, that the offender enters any of the places mentioned therein. So to repeat, the offender enters what place? A warship, fort or military, naval, establishment or reservation. Outside of those places, there can be no espionage. Second, the offender has no authority. Therefore, meaning the offender has no authority to enter any of the places mentioned. And number three, the purpose of the offender is to obtain information, plans, photographs, or other data of a confidential nature relative to the defense of the Philippines. Now, what are the elements of this second way of committing espionage? Number one, that the offender here must be a public officer. Second, that as such public officer, he has in his possession the articles, data or information referred to in paragraph 1 of Article 117 by reason of the public office he or she holds. And number 3, the offender discloses their contents to a representative of an entire nation. Note this out. The crime of treason can only be committed in times of war, and the crime of espionage can be committed both in times of war or of peace. Now, in paragraph number 1, there must be what? A physical entrance of the place. There can be no espionage if the offender does not physically enter. Second thing to remember is the offender in paragraph 1 must have the intention to obtain information relative to the defense of the Philippines, merely taking possession of the plans, photographs, etc. Without such intention is not enough or will not constitute the crime of espionage. Third, the information to be obtained must be in relation to the defense and not to the offense of the Philippines. Number 4, it is not necessary that the offender actually obtains such information, plans, etc. It is enough that his or her purpose of entering the same is to obtain such information. And number 5, the offender here may be a citizen, a foreigner, a private individual, or a public officer. In paragraph 2, public officer must have possessed the information, plans, data, etc. is relative to the defense of the Philippines by reason of the office he or she holds. And number 2, the offender or the public officer to be liable must have disclosed such information to the representative of our nation. These two requisites must concur before, even if the public officer has in his possession information, plans, data relative to the national defense, but he did not disclose the same to the representative of a foreign nation, then he will not be held liable for espionage. The representative here means or refers to the official representative of an entire nation, not just to any foreigner or even to a public officer of that foreign nation. An example of an official representative of foreign nation is the ambassador. Now, there are other acts of espionage punished under a special law. The special law is Commonwealth Act number 616. So, while in the revised penal code, there are only two ways of committing espionage. In Commonwealth Act number 616, there are 14 acts. Now, 14 distinct acts of committing espionage. Now, let me give you a rundown. First is Section 1. Unlawfully obtaining or permitting to be obtained information affecting the national defense here. Physical entrance is no longer necessary. We also have Section 2, unlawful disclosing of information affecting the national defense. We also have Section 3, disloyal acts or words in time of peace. Section 4 contains disloyal acts or words in times of war. Section 5 says the conspiracy to violate the preceding sections. So, in sections 1, 2, 3, and 4, they're harboring and concealing violators of the law. Under Section 6, we have other unlawful acts in Sections 9 to 14. Again, all of these are found in Commonwealth Act number 616. So, under each section, there are several ways of violating. For example, in Section 4, there are several examples wherein if a person willfully makes or conveys of false reports or false statements with the intent to interfere with the operation or success of the armed forces of the Philippines, that will be considered as a disloyal act because that kind of acts are punished under Section 4. There are several ways by which the crime of espionage is to be committed. Now, is there a difference between espionage and treason? Of course there is. And what is the difference between espionage and treason? The first is in treason. It is committed only in times of war. In espionage, it can be committed both in times of war or in times of peace. And the second difference is that in treason, it can only be committed in two ways, whereas espionage can be committed in many ways.